Greetings, travelers. My name is Nick Murphy.
And my name is Satchell Drakes.
And welcome to the Cinephilia Anonymous Telecast. We're going to take you on an interstellar adventure through the darkest corners of your mind to unlock your hidden passion for cinema.
You know, it's pretty relevant that we're going through the darkest parts of people's mind. I mean, especially considering Eternal Sunshine, but also Inception. We've been doing a lot of not only journeying through the darkest parts of people's mind, but journeying through the characters' minds. Talking to the people about.
What did we do before? I had this procedure done where I had a lot of things wiped from my memory, so I don't remember what we've done before. No, you're right, dude. We're doing a lot of like heady stuff, it's just cool, man. I like I think movies like this give us like a whole bunch of like jumping off points and things to like extrapolate from, which is you know, any good movie my favorite part about going to the movies is the diner talk afterwards, you know? And that's what we're doing here.
Hey, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that
it's nice, man.
It's totally like a filmy reference for what it is.
Yeah, dude. You're just like, hey, let's go grab a bite and like let's talk about what we just saw like forever.
Yeah.
So like you said, this week we're discussing Eternal Sunshine. Real quick, a little bit about Eternal Sunshine. It came out in 2004. It is, to summarize it real quick in one sentence, about an estranged couple who have each other erased from their memories. It's written by Charlie Kaufman and directed by Michel Gondry. Yeah. So this will be the second Charlie Kaufman piece that we've done, right? I think he did Her, I believe, right?
Oh, did he?
Let me just double check that. I thought that was the case.
Now I'm interested in trying to find the fingerprints in that.
Yeah, screenplay by Spike Jonze. No, I'm super mistaken. I feel like a dummy now.
It's all good.
Yeah, right?
Curiosity redacted.
Yes. We're good then. But no, so Satchel, just give us like a quick guide.
Yeah. I thought, the moment you said that it came out in 2004, I actually didn't look up when it was done, but I remember watching it. And I guess you sort of get caught up in like the aesthetic of things. You try to figure out when it came out. The moment I realized Jim Carrey was in it, I was like, okay, this has been around for a minute, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing that I thought. But I was like, but it's in 16:9. But the 16:9 made it feel like it was like current. But then the way that this sounds super weird, but like the way that the grain in the film was moving around made it feel like it was like late 90s, early 2000s, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And now that you say 2004, I was like, I guess that's kind of like the sweet spot between the two.
Yeah, it's got that I feel like it was at a point where like soundtracks were like very, I don't know if I was just like super into music when movies like this came out, but I just remember like this movie and like Garden State and just being like, these soundtracks are my life.
Yeah, dude, I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah, it's definitely. I just remember like there's like the Beck song that like plays at the end of the movie, and then there's also like a Polyphonic Spree song that plays. Then I'm just like, oh yeah, Polyphonic Spree. Remember them? They were great.
Yeah, it's definitely these. It's the soundtrack, and it's like the dialogue in Eternal Sunshine. And now you mentioned Garden State, that totally has me thinking like these were the films that weren't but preceded like Mumblecore in a kind of way.
Dude, oh my god, it really does. I was like, you get these pieces of their relationship, and the dialogue just feels, you're right, it feels very Mumblecore. It feels natural. It doesn't feel like a movie, doesn't feel like a script. It just feels like these little pieces into like these people who don't speak eloquently, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the arc wasn't like clearly outlined in a way. Like I wasn't lost, but I was just wrapped up in whatever was going on in that moment, and I didn't really worry about like, oh, well, when is it going to turn over? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, how is this really going to resolve? I was pretty much just caught up in the current. It almost seems like a lot of the films that came after that did get labeled as Mumblecore. I'm trying to think of what comes to mind. The kind of romance that, I don't want to get ahead of myself. A kind of romance that comes to mind is Someone and Someone's Infinite Playlist, I think.
Oh, Nick and Nora.
Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist and like Away We Go.
Yeah.
Both have these like super realistic romances that felt very similar to it, but now they seemed very derivative of what I saw in Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah.
But to get into it so that people know what we're talking about, Eternal Sunshine is I'm going to call it a compound romance. I'm just going to make terms up. A compound romance because it's not just a romance movie, right?
Right. I think if you were to go into a video store, I think you could easily find this movie in many of the genre categories that they break down. You could put this in romantic comedy. You could put it in science fiction. You could put it in drama.
Yeah.
It's all over the place, man, which is great. I'm sorry. Continue.
No, you're totally right. It's a compound romance between a guy named Joel and a gal named Clementine who meet on a Long Island Railroad, and little do they know, they were actually in a previous relationship before they met. They met, but they had met before, but they don't remember it because in their previous relationship, they got into a fight, and Clementine, played by Kate Winslet, wipes her mind. She goes to this, and this is where the sci-fi part comes in. She goes to this clinic of sorts called Lacuna, and she wipes her memory specifically of the relationship that she had with Joel. Yeah. And Joel, sort of like pissed off, but also like destroyed because of the relationship, does so as well. Right.
He's kind of. I feel like he's. And when he puts the pieces together and finds out what this thing is, he's like confused. But I got this like watching it again. I got this like intrigueness to him. He's kind of like, oh, that's a thing you could do. I'm interested in that. Like when he has that scene where he's talking it over with his friends and stuff, he's kind of like, I just got that vibe watching it again. For me, my memory of it before was just like he does it out of spite. But for me, watching it again, I was kind of like, oh, he kind of has this like other motive where he's like, oh, that's interesting. I might pursue that, Yeah.
I like how they did it. And actually, I think part of the like stems that kind of reach into the her narrative, even though no one in the cast is really like no one who worked on it is the same person, is that idea of this new futuristic technology existing and no one calling like horrific attention to it. You know what I mean? Like, whoa, wipe your mind. Right. That didn't happen. Right. It was just a thoughtfully considered thing that existed that everyone accepted, and you just accepted it.
Yeah, I find that kind of sci-fi so much more interesting than like, we talked before
justifying
about,
it, right? Where you were like, you don't have to explain the suitcase in Inception.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like it, for me, like movies like that, I feel like it's such a better way to deal with it. It's just like, this is the world we live in. Accept it. We don't need to justify it to you or the audience. And like I like that the doctor and like Joel had speaking for the audience is like, shouldn't I be worried about brain damage? And the doctor's like, well, technically this is brain damage.
Yeah
Super interesting.
What was cool was that, and one thing they did that Inception shied away from a little bit more, which is fine, is that they did get more into the science of mind erasing, like as they were like exploring Joel's mind. Like, they would kind of talk amongst themselves, and you were kind of forced to listen. But I was completely okay with the premise. Like, I just invested faith in the system that memories can be targeted in different regions and like concentrated for disposal or whatever the case may be. Because it was almost like they had a map of Joel's brain, and then they were like, oh, well, he's in the upper left region, but we want him in the lower right region, so let's laser or whatever it is. We don't even know what it is, right? And you're just like, all right, cool. Like, I get that. It's like a RTS or something.
Yeah, it makes sense. And the visual representation, there's like a graphical representation of that where they have this picture of the brain and Joel's wearing the helmet and stuff, and it just, you're like, oh, zap, it's done. But then to see it from Joel's perspective, like in his mind, like, wow, how the effects of the film and the camera tricks were incredible, and it was such a great execution of that idea of
the whole thing.
It was
phenomenal. So good. I was like, how did they do that? What? How does that pan reveal a different scene? That was amazing.
Oh my, are you talking about on the street?
Yeah, on the street, and then when he's in the room and they like turn, and then like all the distortions and the just everything. But to jump back into the we're clearly going to be talking about.
I know we're super excited about
there's
everything.
so many things. Okay, so all right, the one important thing to take away is that Joel is naturally like this introvert, right? And Clementine is very impulsive, so that sort of explains like Clementine getting the mind erasal. She was definitely in the moment. She was very passionate. She was very emotional.
Sure.
And as a result, she went out and she did this thing impulsively. And then Joel, like you said, saw it, thought it over, and he decided to go through it as well. And what we actually find out is that a lot of the supporting roles, like there are a lot of supporting roles around this romance. So like the romance is kind of like the centerpiece, but not exclusively. There's the team of people that are working on like wiping people's memories for a living.
Right. Yep.
The employees of Lacuna. And we have a series of different relationships where Patrick, who's the guy that approaches Joel while he's sitting in his car in the beginning of the film, is dating Clementine. In
the present now, yeah. And that's something too what the movie does too. We're seeing a few. I mean, the movie jumps around in time quite a bit, both time. I guess like literally and in memory. I guess I guess it's hard to put a timeline out. Yeah.
There's the way I had it. I tried to like sketch it out because I needed to like. Let me know. All right, let's figure this out together. Okay. So it starts off in Act 3.
Yes.
And then when Patrick approaches Joel, it becomes Act 1.
Right, exactly.
Where he's in his apartment and he goes to sleep, and that's when they're wiping his memory. And then there's this montage of their relationship, which is the dream, which is Act 2.
And which Act 2 almost plays... the events of Act 2 play in reverse. Like if we're talking about from Joel's perspective in his head, those events are playing in reverse. So we're seeing the
from the fight to the inception.
Yeah, we're seeing the deteriorated relationship all the way back to, it's how they met, basically. But at the same time, although it's playing backwards, Joel and Clementine are experiencing it in present time and able to react to these little moments, these little memories.
Right.
But yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, Act 2 is like that. And then on top of that, on top of Act 2 being from Joel's perspective, we also have a present day Act 2 happening from the perspective of the Lacuna employees.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. This is right. So there's the Act 2 is like parallel timelines, and exactly. And there's sort of like it's not really a love triangle. There's just a lot of romance.
You know what is great about this movie is that we see a lot of relationships in a lot of different places. So if love is a big theme, if love and loss is a big theme in this film, we see a lot of different types of love and relationships and a lot of different loss. I mean, we see we see new love, new and exciting love with Mark Ruffalo and her name escapes me, Kirsten Dunst's character. Mary. So we see their love like, oh my God, I'm dating this girl. It's exciting, isn't it exciting? And it's great, and everything is so much fun, and we're gonna have a great time together. And at the same time, we're seeing Patrick and Clementine, someone who's just
completely dysfunctional, where Patrick is playing into her romance by mimicking her memories of Joel, which is like just sick.
It's demented. I mean, he says at one point he's like I stole some of her underwear, and Mark Ruffalo's like, don't tell me that, like I don't want to know that. Yeah. And their relationship is such a one-sided relationship where Elijah Wood is so into her, and she like wants to be into the idea instead of like actually with him,
Right. And it's like she still secretly knows that Joel exists.
Oh yeah, exactly. When Patrick does something that triggers like a weird memory for her, it just sets her off. She's like, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here. Like it immediately feels wrong and puts her in a weird state. And then on top of that, we have Joel's friends, David Cross, and I forget the actress's name, but they are in this like what we assume is a long-term relationship. We assume that they're husband and wife, but they're just kind of like nitpicky with each other, and it's kind of this farther end on like the relationship dysfunctionality spectrum. And then from that we have the doctor and his wife, who are like at the way far end of that. And on top of that, the doctor and Mary have this past. You know, there's a lot of like really intricate relationships that we're seeing little snippets of, and at the same time we're seeing the deterioration and the resurrection of this other relationship. This movie's firing on all cylinders, man. It's nuts.
It's crazy. What is crazy about that relationship between Mary and I think his name, he's like the head doctor. I think it's Dr. Howard or something like that.
Yeah, she keeps calling him Howard, yeah.
Is the whole, and this is where it puts the skin on this idea of having your mind erased. Like in the beginning, it just seems like the idea of your mind being erased just seems like the ideal answer to this problem, because as you see the relationship deteriorate, you start to feel really awkward for them. And it seems like a very clean and clinical process to just remove all the bad memories and start over completely. And for me, when I saw like Mary pursuing Howard, not knowing that she voluntarily had her own mind wiped from already having an affair with him, like, because Howard's married, and she has an affair with him. His wife finds out, she gets her mind wiped, and it just put skin on that for me. Like seeing this really like clean and interesting thing, and then watching how it can go wrong or be used improperly. Like she's so broken when she realizes that it happened to her, you know, that she was one of them.
And the dialogue is just so great, because the wife is leaving, and she's just like, I wrote it down. She's like, "You can have him. You did," and it's like, I was like, oh my gosh, man, it was crazy. It's crazy. And like, it's a shame because Mary's such this wide-eyed girl, even after having her memory. And I think that scene and like that sequence with Mary and Howard kind of sets up this idea that like you can erase the memory, like the physical representation of events and things that happen, and you can get rid of that part of it, but deep down there's these feelings that will just come back up, that will just bubble up, and we see that obviously with Joel and Clementine, but I think that's where you start to see like this isn't a permanent and perfect process. It's messy, and there's just some things that you just can't erase out of your mind, that people are people and they're going to do what they do no matter how much you like try to condition them a certain way or anything. Man, I love this movie. Oh man. I had a comment.
What's our grand question for this film?
Oh, I had a couple kind of, I mean, obviously I think the big one is, would you kind of like erase someone from a previous relationship, Okay. Is it worth it? Are there implications and stuff? So that's something we can address. Anonymous. Yeah, Cinephilia Lovers Anonymous. So I think that's something we can tackle with that. Maybe in part 2 we'll get into that part. But yeah, I just it's such a heady movie that I think that
an artistic
movie.
It's a left and right brain film. Gosh, so good.
It really is, because and I think that was something I thought would be interesting about the movie, is just like the ideas that it tackles of perception and memory, and just kind of how does that come across in the film. You have a movie that's dealing with memory and stuff, and it would be easy to just do it in flashbacks, but I feel that Michel Gondry tackles that in an interesting way, both visually and I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to put my thought into words, but he tackles it in a way that's visually interesting, as opposed to just a simple way to do it.
Sequences,
yeah. It could have just been tackled with dialogue or anything, but I mean, the way the movie starts is phenomenal too. Like the credits don't start until
Yeah, I noticed that. That was interesting.
What we've established as Act 1. You know, we see that sequence of them meeting, and then Joel. It's cuts. You know, it's like a smash cut to Joel crying, and the credits start right there, which is, you know, we're a good. I want to say like 5-10 minutes into the movie at that point. Yeah. So like that was interesting, and then even the credits come up and then they slowly fade away, which is like a motif that runs throughout the movie. Like Joel will have a memory that takes place back at the Barnes and Noble, and everything will be crisp and clear, and he can see the spines of the books, and then as he goes back to that, the spines are like white and start to fade, and then the books start to get deleted. And it's a great way to.
And then even like as they're like arguing out in the street in the grocery store, like all the signs of the store start going away. Like, oh gosh,
it's interesting, man.
What I love about that kind of stuff, and what films need to do now, they need to do this. Like, when those things go away, they're not like, whoa, good idea. Let's have a bunch of B-roll where we do close-ups of the spines of the books and the signs of the stores and show them that it's going away.
Right.
Like, it's so subtle, as it should be, right? Because you're in the moment, you're in the arguments and the conversation, and then all these things are going away, and you kind of catch wind of it, but you're not really sure. Oh, I just love that.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, to contrast Inception with this is, you know, Inception is big and loud and makes a big deal about that motif and that idea. And a spectacle, exactly. And there's really only one scene that kind of happens in this, is when Clementine's walking away in one of Joel's memories, and he's driving, chasing after her, and this car just comes crashing down that Clementine doesn't even react to, and Joel's just like, see, everything's falling apart, and then they never really address any of that stuff. I mean, Joel reacts to all these things happening, but not in a way that's like nothing is that process isn't put on a pedestal. It's just this is what's happening, and
it's just what it is.
Exactly. It's very subtle, which is really nice. So I want to talk about like Joel's perception of all of this stuff and what's happening to him. Like what I mean, he's experiencing all this stuff in all these events in a first person, both in his own brain and both out in the real world. I just wonder, like, what does the movie do a good job of like portraying that first person thing? Like, I think I kind of feel that it does. I feel like experiencing those things and experiencing those memories live almost. I feel like the movie does a great job with that and puts the audience in that kind of mindset.
So are you saying, are you asking if this film does a good job at putting the viewer in Joel's shoes?
Yeah, I think I remember a lot of people saying that the movie was kind of convoluted and hard to understand, but I don't think that's the case at all.
I don't think so at all. This movie, like, even though it has a lot of artistic merit and it has a lot of intellectual merit, it is not. It's extremely humanistic, so it's very, very relatable. I have obviously I have a slant, right? But
yeah.
Because we make things, so we kind of see it a little bit differently.
Sure.
But I've seen like how art house things can get, and that movie, it had abstractions, but it wasn't abstract. Like if you've been in a relationship, you can understand 80% of the things that are happening. You might not necessarily like the timeline. You might have to watch it twice to really get a grasp of how the timeline is flowing. I didn't. But and that's not like a brag, like, well, I didn't. But you know what I mean? Like, I didn't, and I feel like most people can handle it.
Sure.
But it didn't feel that much over the head. Now, for me, with the full understanding that this is fiction, I've always related to like the introverted guys like Joel, and then been attracted to or dated girls like Clementine.
Sure.
Though I don't see I don't see many archetypes like her portrayed as much in film anymore. The last one I saw and loved was like Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim.
Right. It's very.
They're almost the same person, really.
They are
actually they are, even with the hair changing.
Right.
And then they say, "Oh, it's because I'm impulsive." Actually, I wonder if that was a callback. I don't know.
It might be. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of pop culture references in Scott Pilgrim.
So that relational dynamic, I really dug, and I think it was. I don't know. It's like classic complementarianism. Like that. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the with the flashbacks and the jumping through time, at the end of the day, you really didn't need to know the specific order of events in order to get it.
Right. You didn't need to experience it firsthand. You were. I think it was easy to
because the ending was still the ending, and the beginning was still the beginning-ish. You know,
right.
Like I might not have pieced together, if I don't know, 10 years ago, I might not have pieced together right away that like, oh no, they actually met at the barbecue on the beach. And then on the train they met the second time. Sure. But with the exception of that, that's the only real thing that it's super important that you know where it lands in the film.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the filmmakers do a good job of relaying that information. I think seeing the end of the movie first, I think gives you a good sense. It gives you like something to like build toward, to be like, oh, well, what happened to that part? And then when it happens like for real, it's like, oh, I see what happened. It's a nice like aha moment for the audience.
I know. I was like, I perked up when he woke up in his bed and it was the same scene as the first. I was like, oh, shoot. All right, reel it in for me, man. Reel it in. Let's.
Yeah, seriously, man.
So good.
I feel like it would have been easy. We talked a little bit about the comparing this to Inception and the spectacle of it. I think like a lesser director would have kind of reveled in that, and I'm a big fan of Michel Gondry, and I feel like he does that with some of his films. He kind of builds a visual motif or trick and just kind of uses it a lot. But with this movie, I felt like all that stuff was very subtle and done. I mean, Michel Gondry is like, he's such a talented director, and I think that like weaving those tricks around this plot, I think made a lot of sense, instead of trying to like find a trick or a reason for these things to happen and weaving a script around that. I think building the visual style around the script, I think worked really nicely.
And then also keep in mind that any kind of film or short film, at least and this is just based on what I've seen, any kind of film or short film that has anything to do with dreams, you have a lot of leeway to do things that may not necessarily need any kind of justification. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, that's not to take away, like, that's not to say that it was easy because it was all a dream sequence, because that's not true.
Right.
Definitely in the films and short films that I've seen that have anything to do with dreams, you tend to see a lot more really intriguing, creative stuff, and you accept it because it's a dream.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting.
There were a lot of like cool like, little things. Like we talked about him walking down the street and then winding up at the same end of the street. Like that's I remember seeing that and be like, oh, the car. Oh my God, it's so good. And it's all one shot. It's super well done. And one thing that a lot of people were talking about on our subreddit, they were mentioning the kitchen scene where Jim Carrey looks like a little kid compared to which is like a forced perspective kind of thing, and it's just so well done. It's great that like the story stuff like that
took a nice little comical turn, and I mean that just plays to Jim's strengths anyway.
How did you feel about him as an actor? I mean, he had done, I remember the first serious thing that I saw him in was The Truman Show, which is
me
great.
too.
And that's maybe something we should do on the show at some point.
Yeah.
But it was really nice to see him just be real. I feel like a lot of comedic actors make really good dramatic actors because they pull off that subtlety and they can kind of like dial it back in an interesting way.
I think probably the strongest dark actors, in my book, end up being comedians. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it almost has anything to do with, I think it just has a lot to do with the nature of comedy. I forget who said it, but like comedy is essentially, they said that comedy is essentially it's tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
Which the moment I heard that, I was like, yeah, that's essentially what it is. Like that's sort of like that. I mean, that's the crutch of most punchlines has to do with either something dark, something tragic, something lightheartedly unfortunate, or prejudice. Right?
Yeah.
It's always a commentary on this thing. Like we're always laughing something off when we laugh at something. And,
right.
Because of that, like I've always seen an inherent strength in strong comedians playing dark roles, because in order for them to write the things that they write, they probably have an intimate understanding of that darkness, for lack of better words. And it sounds like you know what I mean? Like, especially with, like, if you think about like for example, Dan in Real Life, that was a great performance.
Yeah.
There was this other film that Will Ferrell was in. He had a really good serious performance as well. Truman Show, that was an amazing serious performance.
Yeah.
And as far as Eternal Sunshine is concerned, I felt like Jim Carrey did a great job again. I by no means did his performance pull me out of who Joel was or could have been.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel he did like a horror movie at one point that I was kind of just like, come on, Jim Carrey.
You're talking about 13 or 7 or 11, the number?
The number 23, that's exactly what it is, yep.
I got all the wrong numbers.
I guess that's what it is, man. I guess, like, if you can... I guess we can give comedic actors, like, leeway for serious things, but not for... I don't want to say trivial things. I feel like that's mean.
Well, horror films do often end up going down the route of
right.
So like that, if I'm supposed to, then it becomes hard for me. Then the suspense of disbelief makes it hard for me to really believe. I'm also not one of those, like, when I watch a film and an actor's in it and I've seen the actor in another thing, I understand that if you're an actor, it is your job to act and to not play one role. So I won't. A criticism you'll hear from me is never like, oh, but when I saw Jonah Hill, I just kept thinking of Superbad. Like,
right.
There's no, because it's like, you're an actor. I know that. Yeah. So it's fine. But yeah. So with regard to that, I never see like a funny person. I'm like, well, but you're just this one-dimensional caricature.
Right. You're just the funny guy. Be the funny guy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right. Well, why don't we take a break and we will come back and discuss more Eternal Sunshine.
See you soon.
Cool. The Cinephilia Anonymous Telecast is produced by Satchell Drakes and Nick Murphy. Music by Mark Junker. You can hear more of his music at junker.ca. That's junker.ca. You can follow the Telecast on Twitter at CA Telecast. Subscribe on YouTube at CA Telecast. Subscribe on iTunes. And check out our website, catelecast.com.